Hey, welcome to Book Club. We really hope you aren't just catching up on the book with me every Sunday, but that you're reading or listening to the book yourself. It's the only way it sticks, and we need this to stick. In reading chapter 10, 11 and 12, we see why this has to stick. In these chapters, we see that either little or large, we have to be willing to sacrifice to get into the sacred. Don't we want to get into the sacred, church? Don't you personally, as a follower, as a believer, want to get into the sacred? If we want this for us and our community, this is why this book needs to stick. Let's start with the little in these chapters. This part involves Virginia Page, our socialite who knows all the right people and knows all the right things, but suddenly come to realise that all these things mean nothing. Instead of partying, she was praying. Instead of working her way up the socialite ladder into popularity, she was working her way down into obscurity. Instead of perching on her pedestal, she was on her hands and knees with the outcast. And now in this chapter, instead of staying safe at home tucked away from the drunks, she was tucking the drunks safely in her home. A few chapters ago, we seen Virginia on the floor weeping with a woman from the community who had responded to the altar call at the mission tent. As Virginia points out, Satan is always trying to steal what God has sown. And now she was seeing this girl again on the streets, off her face, drunk, and yet singing one of the worship songs. Side note to this, no matter how out of it you feel, down you feel, distracted you feel, don't let Satan steal your worship. It is the catalyst to keep you moving when you feel like you can't move anymore. And just like for this drunk woman, hope is not deferred for you either. Virginia picks her up, reminds her she doesn't belong to hell, she belongs to Jesus, and takes her home. And Granny was not best pleased about it, to say the least. She was very concerned about their reputation. Not only was Virginia in a fight with spiritual principalities, but with her own flesh and blood. Again, her convictions could not be altered. Society was not her God. The verdict of society was not of any value to her. She just wanted to do what Jesus would do. So, the grumpy granny moved herself out of the house and Virginia moved the drunk girl in. The application for us in this is realising that this is such a little act of kindness. Virginia was just going about her daily life with her friends until she seen a need and stopped and done something about it. The doctor's orders for this hurting girl was quiet nursing, careful watching and personal love. Isn't that so Jesus? We see him time and time again in the Bible, places to go, people to see, people to outrun sometimes, but yet he always stopped. No matter what state we are in, he will always stop to pick us back up, remind us that we don't belong to hell but to him. And then he quietly nurses us, carefully watches us and personally loves us. That is what Jesus would do, and that's what we as his church need to do to each hurting person that we come across. So let me wipe away my tears before we go on to the large in this story. Where one person does a little act of kindness in response to asking what would Jesus do, we now see that question in response from a whole group, where that question was the force of their whole lives. As the weeks had passed, the glory of the Spirit's power possessed all their best thoughts. Are you giving God your best thoughts, your first thoughts, your priority thoughts? For them, it was greater than any thought. In doing this, they had experienced the sacred. What greater miracle is there than a regenerated human moved to life through Jesus? But the environment and Raymond was too great an obstacle. Alcohol was still ruling the community. But where they had avoided the sacred duty of citizenship and getting involved, they were now going to organise the forces of good for the battle of the corruption, a campaign of organised righteousness. We read for the first time in its history, Raymond seen its professionals, its teachers, professors, doctors and ministers come together to take political action and put themselves definitely and sharply in public antagonism. As they showed up, the vote showed up in their favour. The liquor stores were on their way out. Although the vote showed up in their favour, they were not in favour with the community. These 3 chapters close with our group being smashed with verbal and physical abuse, and that drunk girl that Virginia had looked after got caught in the crossfire and lost her life. At this point in book club, I usually turn it around on us and ask, are we doing this? Are we experiencing this? But I think it's safe to say that we have experienced the abuse, the protest of doing what is good instead of what is normal, and we have been put definitely and sharply in public antagonism. And we probably will again, but we're on the right tracks. Jesus said that as he was hated, we would be hated. And as we follow in Jesus' steps, this is no shocker. The tension in this is always the same. Are we willing to sacrifice our favour with people to reach the sacred place with God that Jesus has walked out before us? So let's see what happens next. Start here. Get the book now at www.gpastors.co.uk/in his steps.